Hello, this is Gabriel, and we are still in step 3, analyzing the survey results in this 5 steps to a successful Moti journey. And this time we're going to have a look at the filters, the filter function on the Moti app, and how it helps you make sense of your data. So we have 2 filters. One that allows you to compare males with females, and another that allows you to compare between 3 age groups. So let's start with how this gender filter works. It's actually quite simple. We're here on the dashboard page on the Moti website, and you can see there is a button called filter, and you just click on that and you will see this. And here you have the choice between, well, filtering by age group or by filtering by sex. So let's say you want to compare males with females. Well, start by selecting female, for example. It would also work if you started with the males. Now, you'll notice that all genders are selected by default. This means that if you don't use the filter, you get everybody. And also remember that you need at least 5 respondents of each sex, of each category, for the filter to work. And this is for reasons of confidentiality. So imagine that you had a team of 5 with 1 woman and 4 men. You would know what the woman had answered if you use the filter. So filters cannot work if you have less than 5 people in each of the categories. And so what I've done here is I just copied and pasted the dashboard for males and females. So I filtered for male, got the male, pasted it here, filtered for female, pasted it here. In gray, you have the common benchmark. This is a benchmark of volunteer coordinators. So in dark gray. So in both dashboards, in both profiles, you have the same shape in gray. And you can see that the shape between men and women is not very different. So perhaps a little more engagement among men, a little less perseverance among women, and maybe a little more fulfillment among women than men. But really, honestly, these are not major differences. So in terms of motivational outcome, we see that the profile of men and women is pretty much the same. No major difference. Now, you remember in a previous video I said look at the distribution of answers and look at the distribution where you seem to find more striking differences. So here we have the question, I feel like I can be myself at my volunteer activity. Well, you'll notice a difference here. The majority of men fully agreed with the statement, whereas most women somewhat agree with the statement, with more neutral and somewhat disagree among females. You have the dashboard bar below, which tells you the same thing. Now, why is this interesting? Well, because I feel like I can be myself at my volunteer activity is actually one of the questions that go into the autonomy score. So we're seeing that there might be a difference in autonomy, at least for that question, between men and women. Now, we also know that differences in autonomy, in belonging, and in competence, those 3 basic psychological needs that are central to self-determination theory, are affected by the leadership style of the supervisor. And now, as you can see, it gets really interesting because we have very remarkable differences between men and women in this same sample. Men score like the benchmark in listening, understanding, and encouragement, whereas women score lower in all 3, especially in encouragement. So here we might be onto something. So let's see what that means. My supervisor encourages me to ask questions, and look at the difference. You have more, the distribution of answers is shifted slightly towards the right among women, so towards the less desirable situation. Now, sometimes it's actually simpler just to make a table and compare the scores themselves. And here I've extracted all the scores for which I see a difference that's probably significant. Well-being, men are report slightly better energy levels than women, but only slightly. So the difference is actually relatively small. We won't really worry about it. But look at autonomy. So as we reported just earlier, women are 0.2 lower in autonomy. So 0.2 is not big, but remember this is when it's between 1 and 5, the scores. So 0.2 is interesting. I mean, it's something already that we might want to look at. But more significant are how different the women rated their supervisors in their leadership skills. Now, in this sample, these are different supervisors. So this is not about one person. This is about how women in that group reported the leadership skills of their supervisors, and they all have different supervisors in this particular group. The most interesting is that the reporting of how well my supervisor understands me is much lower among women than among men, and right behind it we have encouragement, which is also much lower. So I will let you think this through. What that might mean. It can actually mean many different things, and this is where there needs to be a conversation, and you might want to have a conversation with the women and the men separately, perhaps, because if the woman let's say this was one team, which it's not, but let's say it was one team, then if the women need to be encouraged more to talk, maybe it's better to have them talk in the absence of their male counterparts, or with a neutral facilitator. So you can do the same and perhaps even a little more when we compare age groups. So the same way, this is, you've already seen, same method obviously as for the female, the gender, sorry. So this time I'm going to paste them horizontally. So I'm going to start, so I have 3 rows, the youth, those below 30, and the others. These are volunteers. This is in a different sample. So this is a different group than the previous one. These are the motivational outcomes. So you can already see that the shapes are different. So for example, you would see perseverance is high among the 30 to 59, low among those above 60, and sort of in between for the youth, as an example. But they all seem to be around 4.5 in terms of fulfillment. So, can the 3 basic psychological needs explain these relatively minor but significant differences in perseverance and engagement? Well, look at this. In the youth, belongingness is very strong, much stronger than in the other 2 groups. Whereas in competence is particularly strong in the group of the 60 plus, and much, well, not as strong in the other 2 groups, and actually seems to be growing with age. So that in turn can be perhaps explained by leadership skills. So the youth seem to be much more understood than the other 2 groups by almost a full 1 point. They also seem to be slightly more encouraged, and they seem to be more listened to than the older ones. So here we have an example of the needs among the young being better met than among the older volunteers. And these are the what we call management. So these are the other benefits of being a volunteer with this national society. Here we see that the need for status, rewards, and returns is satisfied with the youth, but among the older ones, the rewards are very low, whereas more status seems to be derived by being a volunteer than for the ones in the middle. So this we can probably plot, or first, again, let's make it as a table. And here I'm highlighting in yellow things that stand out for the older generation. So the relative scores suggest that older volunteers are as highly engaged at 4.7 and as sensitive than the younger volunteers to status. The status conferred by their volunteering activity for that national society. They feel more competent than their peers. They seem to expect more rewards for their competence. So very often, the more competent we feel, the more we want to be rewarded for our competence. We think our contribution is more valuable, therefore it needs to be recognized. And in this case, the expectation for rewards is frustrated. So that's this number here. It's frustrated, and probably as a consequence, they feel less understood. Now, because age groups, are about age, and age increases. So let's sort of pretend that we have just three ages: the youth, the middle-aged, the mature adults, and the older volunteers. And here, what I've done is I've pasted. So what I did is I plotted trends. So I put the scores for, say, meaning. This is the score for the youth, the score for the middle group, and the score for the older group. So it just happens to be a straight line, but you see here you have a peak, or here you have a valley. So the youth are here, the 30 to 59 are here, the 60 plus are here. And I've grouped the scores by the shape of the line that joins the three scores together. And so what do I see? I see that for some, for well-being, meaning, and belonging, understanding, rewards, it goes down with age. For some, it seems to be, you seem to have a peak. And then for these, it's the older ones seem to do better than the younger ones, or at the same level as the youth, with this exception here. And just went up. Okay. So this is sort of visualizing possible correlations between this here. So motivational outcomes being sort of associated with belonging, being associated with understanding and rewards. And here, fulfillment, perseverance being somewhat associated to autonomy, levels of autonomy. So I can sort of say, well, if the youth should, there's no reason why the youth should not have the same level of autonomy and competence than the older volunteers. There's absolutely no reason for that. So, and I know from self-determination theory that if the youth are more empowered, if they benefit from more autonomy, they will feel more fulfilled, and therefore they will want to stay and persevere. In the same way that if they are properly trained and supervised, i.e. they get, constructive feedback, they can meet their responsibilities and therefore feel more competent. So here we have the elements of a youth engagement strategy that's based on Moti results. And we can even have numerical targets. So in this case, we say, well, let's increase satisfaction in these two needs, autonomy and competence, and why not take it from 4.2 to 4.5. And as a result of improving the levels of autonomy and competence, we should see an improvement in fulfillment and perseverance. So this concludes this video, which is a little longer than I thought it would be. I might have gone a little far in the interpretation, especially for the age groups. This is a conversation you first want to have with the volunteers before you jump to conclusions. But at the end of that discussion, you see that you have a possibility of giving numerical values that are reasonable to target and to have a KPI for the your volunteer motivation strategy. So I'll stop here. See you soon. Oh yes, and then the next video, which will conclude this series on step 3, will be about circles and benchmarking. Bye bye.